Good Tuesday morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Environment Committee and Energy Subcommittee discussion. My name is Kevin Burns. I'm the mayor of Geneva, Illinois, and proud to serve as chairman of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus Energy and Environment Committee. Today, we have a wonderful discussion. We are going to be discussing with a lot of folks, both our climate action plan for the Chicago region and our Greenest Region Compact, in which articulated goals and objectives for managing stormwater using green infrastructure. Green infrastructure, or natural-based solutions, as we all know, help address our region's greatest climate impacts: flooding and extreme heat. Access to natural and open space, whether small in scale like bioswales and rain gardens, or large in scale like regional preserves, improve community health and resilience, while also providing essential ecosystem services. Further, our climate action plan seeks regional resilience by assuring equitable investments that will bolster the health and resilience of our most vulnerable communities. We are thrilled today and proud and honored and humbled to host the Friends of the Chicago River and Trust for Public Land to help launch an innovative natural solutions tool to help us meet these goals. The Mayor's Caucus, as we all know, has been working with Friends of the Chicago River through the Chicago-Calumet River Watershed Council to plan and design this tool. We are excited by its progress and, of course, its potential. Now, we need your feedback on ideas, and I'll turn the meeting over to our guests to explain the tool and solicit your important and vital input. First, presenting will be Adam Flickinger and Chelsea Grassfield from Friends of the Chicago River. They will give us an overview of the Chicago-Calumet River Watershed Council and guide us through some poll questions. Adam is the planning director for Friends of the Chicago River and leads their watershed community planning, land use, and habitat connectivity initiatives. Adam grew up in Wisconsin, folks, just a few miles from where Aldo Leopold wrote the Sand County Almanac, and enjoys bringing that perspective and that area to urban environmental planning. Chelsea is the policy manager at Friends and leads their advocacy programs, including plastics reduction and other water quality initiatives. Chelsea is also a you got to define this, Chelsea, a speedy and avid marathon runner. What's your best time, Chelsea?
3 hours, 17 minutes, and some change.
3 hours and 17 minutes. That's how long this meeting is going to be. So that's exciting. Also joining us from Friends is Amy Heldman, their planning and GIS specialist, who is part of the team working on the Natural Solutions tool, and is a recent graduate of the Urban Studies program at the University of Illinois, Chicago, with a focus on sustainable cities. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I turn it over to our three panelists. We begin with Adam Flickinger. Again, thank you all for being with us. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much for that welcome. I'm going to share my screen quick
Excellent.
to share our slides. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see that okay.
Looks good.
All right. So Chelsea, thanks again for having us and for this opportunity to share our work. We're really excited to be here. We know that the Mayor's Caucus is doing excellent work. We're great fans of the Greenest Region Compact, and we even gave it an award a couple years back. So we know your work well, and we're excited to be able to connect on this. Chelsea and I are just going to very briefly kind of introduce the context for the Natural Solutions Tool project with the Chicago-Calumet River Watershed Council initiative. And I'm just going to very briefly introduce you to Friends of the Chicago River for those who aren't as familiar with our work. So Friends of the Chicago River was founded in 1979. We're a nonprofit advocacy organization, and our mission is to protect and enhance the Chicago River system for the benefit of people and wildlife. We work across what we call the Chicago River system, which includes the Calumet and Chicago rivers, as well as all the tributary streams, canals, and creeks across this watershed that you see up on the screen. That area covers about 156 miles of waterways, all the way up into Lake County, out west into Will County, touches DuPage County, and then to the border of Indiana. It also covers dozens of community areas that the river system touches, and passes through, of course, the densest part of the city that people kind of picture for Chicago River, but also beautiful preserves, nature preserves, and conservation areas. So Friends has kind of three sectors of work that we do. Chelsea and I and Amy work as part of the policy and planning team, but we also have education and outreach programs. We have a schools program that exposes children to and public school students to water science and issues. We also do physical restoration work in forest preserves. We do in-stream plantings and landscape scale restoration. As far as our planning work, the kind of concept that's at the core of it is this idea that we call the blue-green corridor vision, which is all about understanding the overlapping layers of human development and ecological services that the river system and the land that abuts it provides. And it's really at its core is connectivity. So we think about connectivity in many different ways, including human connectivity and providing the benefits of access to nature for communities and recreation, but also ecological connectivity through stormwater and runoff, but also for habitat and for all the wildlife like turtles and the 79 species of fish that call the Chicago River system home. And so we have many different aspects of the way we kind of implement that vision, all the starting in scale from the close in to the river edge. We provide technical assistance and guidance along for property owners who are along the river's edge, and for especially in areas where the river is rapidly developing. We also think about connectivity and like I mentioned, habitat connectivity more broadly, thinking about systems and networks of open space and how to improve that. We just finished up what we call Habitat Connectivity Action Plan, which looked at hubs of habitat that exist and how to create the linkages that are needed between those fragmented habitats to support and protect biodiversity, which is increasing threat because of climate change in our region. And then part of that work, kind of scaling up again to the regional scale, is thinking about green infrastructure, and that's what we're talking about today. So in 2020, we've partnered with the Mayor's Caucus and Trust for Public Land and 17 other partners on this initiative called the Chicago-Calumet River Watershed Council. And I'm going to let Chelsea talk about that, and also just highlight one policy thing that we just finished up, which is kind of fun, that she'll jump into first. So Chelsea, take it away.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks so much for having us. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, before I talk to you about the Watershed Council, we just wanted to share a couple pictures from an event we just had this past Sunday, which was the Chicago River, or the summer float party on the North Branch of the Chicago River. So as you can see here, we had just under 200 participants get into the river at River Park on their inner tubes, lots of different shapes and sizes and animals. And they floated down to Clark Park, where we had a celebration with food trucks and music and community groups. And it was just a celebration of the long way the water quality has come to be safe enough to be in like that. So it was a fun celebration for all. Keep an eye out for next year's event. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, make sure we're all invited too. That'd be fun.
Absolutely, yeah. We can have a Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus contingency.
Oh my God, could you imagine that?
Yeah, you could get some some big floaties out there. All right, so the Watershed Council, like Adam said, it was launched to establish a forum for collaborative and expanded regional watershed-based stormwater management using multi-benefit, nature-based solutions. We have 19 partners that are part of the coalition, and they represent expertise and decision-making power for water infrastructure, land, and advocating for innovation in these policies. So the missions of these organizations align around the co-benefits of green infrastructure. And as you've heard and can see, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus is a partner of this initiative, and we couldn't be more grateful for their leadership and insight. They connected us last summer with Mayor Burns for a presentation to the council, where he went over the climate action plan, and of course, allowing us to be here today. So thank you again.
Thank you.
We are currently in what we consider the startup phase of this initiative, and in the early days, we held a series of workshops that explored what the focus, tasks, and goals should be to realize our vision for the broader watershed-based green infrastructure investments. Some feedback that we heard were in regards to challenges resulting from agencies and organizations working in silos and competing for limited resources. We also heard about limited capacity to expand green infrastructure efforts to larger scale initiatives that connect upstream sources to downstream effects. And also missed opportunities because planning and implementation is limited by jurisdictional boundaries. So I'm sure for some of you that's maybe ringing a bell. Based on our discussions, we outlined a list of goals, priorities, and tasks to get started. These are the things I just mentioned about creating multi-benefit approach, cross-agency collaboration structures, shared resources, and the focus of our presentation today, which is creating tools that we can use to find those overlapping opportunities to work together. We also wanted to recognize, though, at the beginning of this initiative that there are many excellent and long-standing efforts of all the various organizations working on local green infrastructure and stormwater in our region, including the exciting efforts related to your Greenest Region Compact and the Climate Action Plan for Chicago region, which we know has several water-related goals. So we wanted to incorporate these and build on them. We also see that there is an opportunity to expand and better coordinate the various efforts using successful models from other metropolitan regions, like in the Pacific Northwest, Denver, and San Francisco. We see an opportunity to elevate, expand, coordinate, and support local efforts and to create systemic change in the way that infrastructure is scoped, funded, and implemented. Over the course of this startup phase of the Watershed Council, we've continued to grow the steering committee, recently adding partners from the Delta Institute and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. We've been taking time to connect and learn both locally and nationally with peer watershed health-focused organizations to learn good techniques to improve funding, collaboration, and scaling of green infrastructure. So for example, we've spoken to LA, they have a Council for Watershed Health and other groups like that. We have also identified and kicked off several projects and tasks that were identified by the steering committee as near-term collaborative opportunities. So first off, we have been researching ways to better achieve broader cooperation and alignment with green infrastructure investments across partner organizations in order to expand capacity for regional watershed scale projects. In particular, we are interested in targeting key upstream areas for investment. Also, we are digging right now into and exploring on-the-ground multi-benefit restoration projects that test some of these ideas in the real world. So we're working in partnership with the Chicago Park District on a demonstration wetlands and public access improvement project at Indian Ridge Marsh South along the Little Calumet River. That work has already kicked off and will continue through this year and includes trail and access improvements as well as invasive removal and marsh habitat restoration that will also, importantly, expand the capacity of the marsh to capture, filter, and hold stormwater. Last but not least, coming directly out of our conversations that we had early on about creating better tools for joint decision-making processes, we have partnered with the Trust for Public Land on the Natural Solutions Tool project, which they will talk about in detail in the second half of this meeting. And before we move on to that topic, we'd love to hear what some of your communities are focused on from a stormwater green infrastructure perspective. We put together a couple of quick poll questions to get a sense of the type of work taking place. So Edith or Cheryl will share that now.
Okay. And in addition to the Zoom polls, folks, don't feel shy to throw a comment in the chat. Any questions are always welcome. Right? Oh, okay. Now it's balancing out, Chelsea. Don't panic.
Awesome. So can all the participants see, or do we need to click share results?
Is that sharing now?
Yes.
Everyone's seeing it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. So it looks like over or just under 3/4 of participants are participating in a local watershed initiative or water quality or stormwater coalition.
Good.
And some of those are coming into the chat. And about 2/3 are concerned about issues with stormwater runoff and community flooding. So great, that means this presentation will be extra relevant.
Yeah, Chelsea, it ties in so nicely to our discussions over the last couple of years regarding the #1 issues facing our community. So this is perfect.
Oh, that's great. And then we've got a third, which I believe this is our last question for you all.
There's one more.
Oh, last. Thank you. So what are the top 2 types of stormwater infrastructure projects that your community implements? And I was a former educator, so let's
Yeah.
be good at following directions. Choose only 2, please.
Do you grade on a curve? Yeah.
No, second graders don't usually need a
Oh,
curve.
okay, well, that's why I asked. So
The question just disappeared for me for some reason. It popped up and disappeared. I don't know if that was just me.
Let
Same
me
here.
let me relaunch, yeah, because no one's answering. So
okay.
And once it's relaunched, you can also click on the polls button at the bottom of Zoom if you don't see the poll for some reason.
It disappeared again. I don't see a polls button. Cheryl, where is that?
let me try this one more time. So
Yeah, the polls button, it should be next to the chat button and the share screen button on the bottom of Zoom.
do we, you may not see it if you're co-hosted. Is that working now? I relaunched.
The question's on my.
Yeah,
We're getting some
For some
responses.
reasons-
Okay, great.
Here comes some. Okay.
Better. There we go.
Here we go. Is this kind of what you're expecting here, Chelsea, you think?
Yeah, this
Yeah, it's like,
looks good. Adam, what about you?
Yeah, it kind of makes sense when you think about the grants that go for this type of green infrastructure.
Right.
But it's kind of interesting to see that.
Chelsea, you're smiling. Is that your dog?
It's me.
Oh, no pets over here.
No pets. You know, Geneva, just last night, we approved at our city council investments regarding our 100-plus-year-old infrastructure in our downtown. It's like, we figured we'd just wait 100 years and address it, so.
Okay.
Sharing the poll now, you got that?
Nice.
Great.
Yeah. Looks like we've settled. Maybe we could move to the next one.
Sure.
Absolutely.
All right, so this one is more aspirational. What do you want to do more of?
Yeah.
That's what we like to see. It's good.
And we should probably say we recognize the need for gray infrastructure, but
Right.
obviously it provides one benefit versus nature-based solutions, which is why we advocate for it.
I'll end that.
All right.
It's
Well,
great.
thanks.
Yeah, so now I think we're going to move on to TPL's presentation. So we'll turn it back to Mayor Burns to introduce that.
Okay. Thank you both very much. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Caroline O'Boyle. She is the Associate Vice President, Illinois State Director for the Trust for Public Land, and has spent her entire career working at the intersection of arts, parks, and the great outdoors. She loves, it says here, she loves stargazing, and last week she camped at the forest preserves of Cook County for the, I believe it's pronounced, is it Perseid?
Good enough.
Good enough, meteor shower. So how was that? Pretty cool?
We didn't see any meteors because the moon was too bright, but
Heck, man.
it
We
was
also
fun
have,
to be out there.
oh, I bet it was. We also have Taj Schotland, who is the Associate Director for the Trust for Public Lands Climate Program. Taj is based in Burlington, Vermont. Taj doesn't take vacation time in the summer. Instead, he saves most of his time off for winter ski trips. And of course, Illinois is famous for his downhill skiing. So anytime you want to come to Illinois, Taj. Brian Taverny is a project manager for TPL's geospatial science team, who enjoys bird watching and plans to spend Christmas, listen to this, watching birds in Costa Rica. My goodness. You might want to invite Taj to go skiing there too. The floor is yours, folks. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's really our pleasure to meet this group and share some of our work. And so I thought I would start by just telling you a little bit about what Trust for Public Land is and does, for those of you who are not familiar. So Trust for Public Land is a national 50-year-old organization, and bottom line, our goal is to connect everyone to the outdoors. Next slide. And we do this work because we fundamentally believe that this connection, this access to the outdoors is really important to people's health and well-being. And everybody has to have a park and access to the outdoors. Next slide. We have found through research and through observation that communities that place a high value on parks are healthier, more resilient, and more equitable. And I'm sure that many of you see this in your own communities. Next slide. And community is really the most important. With community at the center, we find the intersection to use parks and outdoors to improve our climate, to advance equity, and to create greater health outcomes for the people that we serve. Next slide. We have 4 main initiatives that we work on to sort of make this real in the real world. We conserve land and protect it for people to use. We identify, create, and complete trails. We design and build parks. And we convert schoolyards into community playgrounds. Next slide. And the resources we have in our toolkit to do this work includes advocacy. We do a lot of lobbying of our elected officials, data and insight, and we'll hear more from our data and insightful people in a little while. We create funding for parks and outdoors through ballot initiatives. We conserve land and we create parks. Next slide. And for this group, I wanted to particularly call attention to one of our initiatives, which is the 10-minute walk, where we're focused on making sure that everybody in our country lives within a 10-minute walk of a park. And we do this mostly through working with mayors of cities who are interested in doing more for this work. And we sort of raise the profile of park access to the public agenda. And a week from today, actually, we're launching a new website that contains a toolkit for mayors. And so if you want to find out more about that, I'll drop my contact information in the chat, and I'd be happy to reach out and talk to you about that more when that website goes live. Next slide. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what we're working on in Chicagoland. Next slide. So in Chicago, we're really most focused on supporting the green and open space goals of the people in our neighborhoods. Next slide. One example is we're working on a basketball court in the North Lawndale neighborhood of Chicago, where we're transforming it from this sort of dilapidated asphalt-ridden basketball court, next slide, to something that's going to not only provide great recreation for people in this neighborhood, but also is going to have green infrastructure features built into it so that it will reduce stormwater flow into the sewers and other great things like that. Next slide. We've also developed the Chicago Infrastructure Reuse Network, where we have gathered community leaders who are working to create these reuse projects like the 606 or like the High Line in their own neighborhoods. Next slide. And one of the things we're very involved in right now is we have a ballot measure going with for the forest preserves of Cook County to increase their funding. And so we're going to have this question on the November 8th ballot, which is if it passes, it's going to provide $1 billion over the next 20 years for acquisition and maintenance of current holding. So if you want to find out more about that initiative, I'm happy to say more about that too. And I also just want to say that Election Day this year is November 8th, which is my birthday. And so this is what I want for my birthday. So I want this ballot measure to
Wow,
pass.
Caroline, how subtle that was to drop your birthday into that presentation.
Yeah.
We're
It's
gonna mark
really-
it in-
Yeah, it's really just my dedication to the
I
work
see.
that we're doing. Oh, we have another November 8th birthday.
Look at that.
Right, we'll both be celebrating.
Well, I will lower the flag at City Hall to half staff for both you and Dr. Sharma. So
Next slide. And then we work on these, we're working on this tool. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Taj to say more about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. So great to be here to see everyone today. Carolyn, if you can monitor the chat, I don't have it open. So folks, feel free to put questions in the chat. The next little bit of the presentation is going to be a little bit technical, but we'll try and keep it fairly high level, fairly interesting. But if anything that we share doesn't make sense or you want to learn more, feel free to put notes in the chat. So we've been working with the Friends of the Chicago River and the Watershed Council on this natural solutions tool. And I just wanted to highlight, so this is an outgrowth of the Trust for Public Lands National Climate Smart Cities program, where we've worked in about, I think now 15 major metro regions around the country to develop similar decision support tools to help guide nature-based solutions. And in tiny little communities, like Camden to major metro regions like Los Angeles County, greater Providence area, greater the Boston region. We were actually supporting the Metro Mayor's Climate Preparedness Task Force in guiding green infrastructure investments. And so in each geography, we develop a decision support tool, and it's based on the same general template, but then we customize it based on local needs. And so what you end up getting is a customized decision support tool, but you can also learn from other cities that have similar tools. So you can learn how Boston Metro Mayor's Climate Preparedness Task Force is using their tool. And you can learn from New Orleans and from Dallas. And so Chicago can learn from others, and others can also learn from the Chicago-Calumet River natural solutions tool once it's developed. So the natural solutions tool, what is it? So it's going to help identify priority locations at the regional, neighborhood, and even parcel scale where multiple benefit nature-based solutions can provide the greatest benefits. And there are lots of different features to the tool. It's publicly, when it's completed, It's publicly available, so anyone can go in and use it, from a city planner to a chief of staff to a community group. And you can create custom analyses. You can use the tool to create sort of pre-baked analyses to hone in on project locations to, let's say, address extreme heat or to manage stormwater. Or a combination of the two. And then you can evaluate impact as well. So if you hone in on a location where you want to develop a nature-based solution project, you can see what are the demographics of the folks that live within a 10-minute walk of that proposed project location to help make the case of who's likely to benefit from that project. And I'll get more into the details of the functionality of the tool, and we'll give a quick demo of a similar tool that we created for another region. So the project workflow in the Chicago region sort of followed 3 phases. It started with a discovery process to understand who are the key stakeholders, what's the great work that's already happened, how do we build on the great work that others are already doing and not duplicate it, and how do we align the tool with local objectives. Then we moved into actually building the decision support tool with guidance from a local technical advisory team of key local stakeholders to make sure that we're using the best data, modeling the correct objectives, and making sure that the GIS modeling that goes into this decision support tool actually reflects on the ground lived realities in the communities. We're in the heart of that process. And then we move into actually integrating the tool into decision-making processes. And we have lots of examples of how other cities and counties have actually embedded the tool to guide capital investments, but we'll really tailor this work in Chicago based on the work that you all are leading. So the discovery process, I won't go into all the details here, and the text is a little bit small, but through the discovery process, we did 18 stakeholder interviews with, I think, 36 different organizations and agencies represented, talking with about 65 folks, held a couple community meetings, and we learned a tremendous amount before we started embarking on actually building the tool. We learned how folks want to use this tool to support collaboration, how to centralize key data sets, make sure that they're embedded into the tool, specific opportunities to guide capital investments. And we also heard sort of some recommendations on how to modify. We went in with some sort of ideas of how we thought we should model the data and the geography of the tool should encompass, but we heard from folks some suggestions to expand, and we took that to heart and made changes. So here you can see the revised modeling boundary. After that discovery process, we expanded it. And you can see that little line there. The decision support tool that we're creating doesn't encompass every community that's represented today, but it encompasses a large number of communities in the region. And these are the modeling objectives. So we're bringing data together to hone in on areas to improve community health, to create equitable communities, to create connected communities, to improve resilient water systems, both absorbing natural stormwater and protecting against riverine flooding, and then to enhance the natural biodiversity of the region. And so these are the sort of the key objectives that we're bringing different data sets together to help hone in on where we should be investing throughout the region to achieve each of these objectives. And I mentioned briefly that we had convened a technical advisory team, and I should have had a list actually in retrospect here who the technical advisory team is, but it's about probably over 20 folks representing a number of different city agencies, community groups, NGOs, consulting firms that are meeting with us monthly as we develop this tool to make sure that we are using the right criteria, the best available data sources, ensuring that we're using the latest and greatest science based on all the great research that folks are doing in the Chicago region. So they're really the heart and soul of this project to make sure that we get it right and then connect this tool through their local networks once it's actually built, because a decision support tool doesn't affect change. It's once people start using the tool and integrating it into decision making that you have that impact. And so this technical advisory team can help be the first step of users to make sure that it's fully utilized. And this is the schedule of the process of building the tool. So we had a technical advisory team kickoff meeting in April. We've had a bunch of meetings since, modeling, reviewing the modeling results for these different criteria over the summer. And then the the draft release date will be in January. Before that, we'll have some beta testing to work out any bugs in the system before it's fully released to the general public. But that's the general timeline of the project. So I'll pause there. I'll do a live demo of a similar decision support tool that we've developed. But Carolyn, do you want to flag any questions in the chat? Or if others have questions, feel free to unmute for a second.
Yeah, I think we're up to date with the questions that came up in the chat.
All right.
I think so too.
Let me end this PowerPoint and the run of show. There we go. So this is a similar decision support tool that we developed for Camden, New Jersey. And it has a public facing portal. I'll just spend about 5 or 10 minutes going through this at a relatively high level. The goal is not that you understand exactly how to use this tool, but you'll understand the general features that this tool will have for in Camden and similarly for the Chicago-Calumet River watershed region. So the tool will have a public facing website where you can actually look at all of the different data that went into the tool. And it's a lot of data that you'll see. So there are literally dozens, if not hundreds of data layers that go into this tool. And we explain the methodology, if we did any modeling, or if we just use the raw data results and including the source, so that folks can go back in and really understand the data around how we prioritize certain regions for nature-based solutions. There's a user guide, there are downloadable PDF maps. So if you don't want to go use the tool and create your own analysis, you can create pre-made maps. There we go, that show the priority locations for addressing flooding, for example, or for mitigating heat islands, for overall priorities. If you want to achieve the maximum multi-benefit opportunity, these are the priority areas in Camden, for example. We'll go back to the main landing page and we'll access the decision support tool. So you click on Mapping Portal and all of the tools are publicly available, but password protected. And this is just for data licensing and so that we can track usage. You can go in, if you don't already have an account, you click Create a New Account. Takes literally 30 seconds and you'll be set up with a free account. So I'm going to log in and you'll see on the right side is just like Google Maps or Google Earth, any mapping platform that you're familiar with, where you can pan left and right, zoom in, zoom out, you can change the base maps, and you can see the project geography where we did the modeling. And on the left are all of the different ways to access a tremendous amount of data. And you can start with overlay data around different objectives. So if your objective is to manage, absorb stormwater, and you click that little folder, and actually your sub goal is to reduce localized flooding. You can see, all right, where are the areas that have, and you can zoom in a little bit and they should show up, the areas throughout Camden that have reported flooding issues. Or if your goal is really focused on combined sewer overflows, here in Camden, we mapped out the sewer sheds that have the lowest wet weather capture. So the sewer sheds essentially that are darker, that are contributing the most to combined sewer overflows. And with each of these folders, there's a ton of different data that you can access. So you could look at maybe heat island data, for example, and they're actual, using satellite data, you can hone in on the hottest parts of Camden. You can see the land surface temperature is 103 versus, let's say, one of the cooler parts of Camden. You can see there's a significant difference in temperature variation throughout the city. Where it starts to get really interesting is the analysis results.
Can I interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I look at those heat islands, can you then scroll down even further and say, this is why it's hotter than the other location? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could overlay it with tree canopy, for example, and be able to see, is it tree canopy, impervious surface, and what's contributing to that? Yeah, that's a great question.
That's really cool. That's a heck of a system you got here.
It's an impressive tool. We've been developing this over probably 10 years now of developing similar tools, and each time we build it, it improves. Wow. I'll just show a couple features. So we also are able to identify. So if your goal is to address stormwater issues, but you want to just hone in on the moderate, high, and very high priority locations throughout Camden, you can, and the local technical advisory team helped us build the data set and do the modeling to hone in on where those moderate to very high priority locations are. Or to address equity, for example, we can turn that data layer off. And if you wanted to investigate specific indicators of equity or put them all together, you could hone in and click to hone in on the priority neighborhoods to address equity. You can also put it all together. So you could say, show me the overall stacked priorities to absorb stormwater, cool heat islands, protect against coastal flooding, and address equity. And because this data, all of this data is tagged down to the parcel scale, when you click on parcels, you'll see these little purple polygons, and you can zoom in. And we saw this area, north part of Camden, as a priority area. And you can click on a parcel and pull up all of this data tagged to that parcel. And takes about 30 seconds to create a profile report. So I already did that. But that's the wrong, there we go. So you can scroll through an 8-page PDF for this individual parcel that shows all of this green infrastructure suitability data, compares it to the neighborhood mean max, to the sewer shed for the individual parcel. So just a wealth of information if you're applying for public grants, private funding, city presentations, community groups, to be able to summarize all of this data about why you might want to focus a project on a specific location. The last two things I'll share, because I think I'm just about at time. I'll turn off these results and I'm going to turn off parcels. It allows the user to set their own priorities. So you click the scenario tool and you could say, my priority is to absorb stormwater. And you see the map highlights the areas for stormwater. But you also, I imagine most hopefully, want to address stormwater in areas that are probably historically underserved. And so you can draw the equity slider up to 10. And you see the map changes. And you may also want to get the co-benefits of cooling a heat island, but that's, let's say, we'll rank that a 4. And the map continues to shift. So a user can go in very easily, set their own objectives, and hone in on specific neighborhoods and specific parcels to meet their objectives. The very last thing that I will share, because all of this data is tagged to the parcel, you can actually query parcels that meet your criteria. So you could say, show me all, and I'm not going to actually do this, but you could say, show me all of the publicly owned parcels that are in a heat island, that are vacant, that are important for managing stormwater, and are over half an acre, for example. And you build that query, takes a minute, and you'll see all of the parcels highlighted on the map that meet that criteria, and you could further refine it. So lots of different ways to get in, access the data from different analysis types to hone in on where nature-based solutions are most needed. So this was completed in Camden, and this is a similar tool that we're going to be building for the Chicago-Calumet River Watershed region. And we're super excited, about probably 75% of the way to having a complete tool for you all, which is very exciting. So I'll stop there. Carolyn, anything to add or questions?
A question came up in the chat about how this tool compares to the EPA's EJ screen.
Great question. So we pull in some data from EPA's EJ screen, and some of you may be aware. So I think it's is it the Justice 40 initiative, where the federal government is looking at sort of a new national model for identifying priority underserved neighborhoods. So we take some of that national data. We'll look, sometimes there's local data that is more accurate. And when that's the case, we'll use local equity data sets. But then we bring in all of this other sort of climate and health and equity data that isn't necessarily in EPA's EJ screen. So this is sort of a more detailed climate tool, sort of EJ screen on steroids, if you will, but providing some of that same data.
And then we have a question about who is responsible for maintaining the data.
Great, another great question. So we we build this model with the technical advisory team, and then we work to update it on an annual basis. And so on an annual basis, we'll send out a survey. How are folks using the tool? Are there new data sets that we should be adding to the tool? Are there existing data sets that have been refreshed? Someone did a new study and now there's a new land cover data set maybe. And so we collect all that information and then update the tool on an annual basis. And we, so the Trust for Public Land will work with the Watershed Council through a continued partnership to keep the tool up to date.
Taj, a quick
Awesome
question.
Yeah.
Question for you. With respect to what you're preparing for the Chicago region, you talk about the Calumet watershed. Can you define those boundaries? You know, like a knucklehead like me out here in Geneva, 40 miles west of Chicago, I would not be in that quote region, would I?
I will let Adam answer that. I can flash the map up for folks, but
Yeah.
Adam, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so we started out with the Chicago-Calumet River Watershed, and then through the discovery process, we talking to some of the key stakeholders like the water agencies and things, we started expanding it out. So it does cover like the Des Plaines River corridor now
Got it.
and some of it. So what we did is started adding sub watersheds kind of
Okay.
as we went. But then at some point we kind of had to stop because this is a grant funded thing and
Right.
there's only so much we can do at this point. But I think the idea is to kind of test this out and see if people really want it, and then we can go from there if there's additional funding and things to expand it.
And thank you so much for the answer. Here's a quick question. Approximately what is the price tag for this work? Is it
It varies.
It does. Okay.
Yes. I forget the exact budget amount for this tool, but usually it's a couple $100,000 to develop these types of tools because it includes a bunch of there's sort of the stakeholder engagement, there's the technical side, and then there's the post-development engagement. But so that's a ballpark
I would have thought a
estimate.
lot more. I had no idea. I really did. So
Yeah.
Camden, the work in Camden is $250,000?
Yeah, a little less.
Now, there's a grant opportunity waiting for the region. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much.
So there's
Carolyn, you
a
wanna add?
question, there's just a question in the chat about how the model incorporates updated climate downscaling models to forecast climate influences on finer spatial scales.
Oh my goodness.
And John Anderson, do you want to unmute and say more about that?
Ben, that is the most sophisticated question I've heard ever. Well
Well,
done.
it comes because of my work with Don Webbles, and I see Ashish is on the line. And so Don is, of course, advancing, and Ashish,
Yes.
much better models that are available today. And we need those models to be able to be place specific in our scenario planning and our mitigation strategies. So I wonder how, Taj, you're incorporating these new models.
Yeah, it's a great question. I was going to let Ashish have that for his presentation, but I guess I'll steal that announcement from him since you raised the question. So yeah, so we are going to be collaborating with Ashish and Don Weeble's lab to bring in their climate modeling into this decision support tool so that you can see the areas across the region that are going to have the greatest increases in extreme heat, greatest increases in extreme precipitation. So the decision support tool will have both current sort of a current assessment of priorities, as well as the user will be able to go and look at future projections as well. And that's really exciting. We're pretty excited to be able to partner with Ashish and the modeling that they've done.
Great work. Thank you.
Excellent work.
So should we transition? I think next up, correct me if I'm wrong, Carolyn, is a quick sneak peek of some of the preliminary modeling that we've already done for this tool. And then we'll do a quick breakout discussion. Does that sound right? All right, let me share my screen again, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Brian. And let me launch it from here. All right, go for it, Brian.
Thanks, Tosh. Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Sound good?
All right, thank you. So Brian Tabney, project manager on the geospatial science team, and pleased to be engaged with local stakeholders and the technical advisory team as part of this effort, as Taj mentioned, kind of right in the middle of going through this process of working with the technical advisory team to populate that decision support tool that Taj walked you through for Camden. And so I'm just going to provide you with a brief overview of some of the work that we've done with respect to a couple of the objectives that Taj outlined in an earlier slide, starting out here with the equity objective. And so through our engagement with the technical advisory team, we work to identify a set of criteria underneath that objective that we can represent spatially and use to prioritize areas for potential green infrastructure investment across the study region. So what you see on this slide is a list of 10 criteria that we've identified through that engagement process with the technical advisory team. Some of these are directly coming from the EPA EJ screen referencing an earlier question. So for example, linguistic isolation, population over 5 or I'm sorry, over 64 or under 5. But there are also local data sets, as Taj mentioned, we pull those in whenever possible. So pointing one of those out, the disinvested communities layer comes from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. And so at this point, we've gone through the process of identifying these criteria. We've worked with the technical advisory team to identify the spatial data sets representing these, and have actually developed a set of preliminary priority layers for these 10 criteria that you see listed here. I'm just going to show you a couple of those maps. Taj, if you can go to the next slide. We'll start out here with, this is what I labeled here in the title as education, but this represents from EJ screen the percentage of the population within a census tract that has at least a high school education. And so the percentage that has a less than high school education. And so we took that information at the census tract level from EPA's EJ screen and developed a set of priorities representing moderate, high, and very high, going from light orange up to red of areas for this particular study region. And so you can get some sense looking at this map of where the populations are with less than high school education. And one of the really interesting things about this particular layer, when we looked at it, was we had initially considered including some additional criteria, low income population, as well as the population lacking access to health insurance. But when we used statistical analysis to look at the relationship between the different criteria, what we found is actually a fairly strong correlation between having a less than high school education and those two other variables I just mentioned. So we wound up making the decision with the technical advisory team to leave those other variables out, because that information is already in a sense captured by this less than high school education variable, and we didn't want to duplicate or have double counting of those criteria by including those two additional variables. Next slide, Tosh. This is that local data set we referenced, the disinvested communities data set produced by CMAP. So these are areas with lower tax base, lower property values, high income rates, suffering from economic disinvestment over a period of time. And and I should mention, this is represented in a binary fashion. So you can see you're either color-coded red or outside those areas. So you're either in or out of one of these disinvested communities. One of the interesting things about this data set that illustrates a larger issue is that you see different patterns in terms of what areas might be prioritized using this layer versus the less than high school education layer we just saw on the previous slide. And so one of the challenges we faced was, well, how do you aggregate the data across not just these two variables that I've shown you on this slide and the previous one, but across all 10 variables? And so what we did was actually work with the technical advisory team to weight the individual layers and then to sum the priorities up across those 10 layers. And that's what you see here on this slide that Taj just transitioned to. So this is equity overall priority categorized across the study region. And again, this is the weighted sum of the priority layers for each one of the 10 individual criteria that you saw on the initial slide. Okay, Tosh, you can go ahead and transition to the next one. Then just briefly touching on another objective, we're looking at healthy communities. So concerns about communities that might be suffering from environmental inequities, conditions that cause environmental inequities. You can see we've developed a list of criteria here in conjunction with the technical advisory team, 14 in this case, so even larger than the last list, that represent either health conditions, so diabetes, asthma, obesity, or represent environmental conditions that might contribute to the development of health problems. So heat island, lack of tree canopy cover, and then some air pollution related metrics there at the very end of the second list. And just walking through a couple of the slides coming up here focused on heat island as an illustration of the mapping we've done in this case. I used Landsat data here, thermal data from the satellite to look at areas that are particularly hot in the study region and call those out as priority areas as part of this tool. And one interesting thing about this particular data set is it's available at a finer resolution than some of the earlier data sets I showed you. So this is a 30 meter by 30 meter pixel resolution data set, whereas some of the other data sets we were looking at are at the census tract level. So you can really kind of narrow in at a finer scale with this data set and look at what areas might be priorities using the Landsat data imagery to get at these hot heat islands. And then relatedly, this is tree canopy cover. This is from the Chicago Region Trees Initiative. This actually is prioritized to represent areas that are relatively lacking in tree canopy at the census tract level in the study region. And why I elected to show you this is it's kind of the opposite side of the previous map we just looked at, and thinking through the challenges of urban heat islands. One way that you can address that is through green infrastructure investments such as planting trees. And so this was kind of interesting just to look at what areas might be priorities for tree canopy and where those overlap priority heat islands in the study region. And then as we talked about with equity, we had this overall challenge of how to combine everything together into one overall healthy communities layer. So we looked at, again, weighting those 14 criteria we talked about earlier with the help of the technical advisory team, sum those up, and what you see here are across those 14 criteria is currently what pops out as being some higher priorities for green infrastructure investment and work. And that's what I had in terms of just sharing some of the progress we've made in terms of modeling up to date. Taj, I know we're on a schedule here. I don't know if I should just move into the next slide that sets up the breakout groups, or pause for if we have a moment to pause and ask if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for that overview. And so, yeah, questions from folks. Otherwise, I think we have enough time. We're following on track to be able to go into some breakout groups to have a short 10-minute discussion. We have some questions for you all, but any questions for us first?
Any questions at all, folks? Fire away, put them in the chat. And then all our presenters have offered their, I believe, their email address too. So if there's any questions afterward, by all means, reach out. This is really impressive work, everyone.
Thank you. It's been a really fun project and a fun collaboration with the Watershed Council.
Wow.
All right. Well, hearing no questions, I'll share this next slide. So I think these are we'll go into breakout groups next. We're gonna have 3 breakout groups and our questions for you. So these are building off the questions that the friends, Chicago River, the Adam and Chelsea shared, but and we'll put these in the chat as well. But we want to hear, what are the challenges that you're facing locally around nature-based solutions, and how are you using some, maybe a little bit more detail than you provided in the poll, of how are you actually using parks and land conservation to achieve these climate, health, and equity benefits? What kind of data and tools are you using? And then we know that not everyone here is in the project geography, but for those that are, could you envision using the tool, and how could you envision using the tool? And we'll be happy to follow up with you once it's built to really support you in utilizing it. Is there anything that we're missing? And then finally, if you're interested in expanding this tool, maybe you're outside the project geography and you want to explore expanding it, first, we want to make sure we get this tool right and done, and we build a nice wealth of uses for the existing tool, but down the road, we are interested in expanding it potentially. So we want to hear from folks if you have interest. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'll copy that and put that into those questions into the chat. And then I don't know who the wizard is behind the scenes that's going to send us into breakout rooms, but
Cheryl is working
Okay.
on that.
Yes, so
That's the most difficult question of all.
I'll be opening the breakout rooms now, so it'll just be opening momentarily.